Hey guys, Scrap It's back, and if you watch my previous videos, you've seen this thing before, and I promised that I'd get to a tear it down video on this thing, and I just haven't had the time to do it, so it's time to do it. So what we have here is a Datex Cardio Cap 2. I don't know if it works or not. I pulled it out of a dumpster that was wet. I looked them up online. They don't really sell. This is pretty outdated stuff. But from my understand, this is something that like you would get hooked up into a hospital and, you know, beep beep kind of a thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing apart and see what's in it. Sorry, I just kicked something under my desk. I'm going to take this thing apart and see what's in it. There is a tube in here, a tube TV. So I'm going to have to be careful with that. I am not a proponent of taking stuff like this apart unless you know how to do it safely or you have a place to recycle those things. They're not meant to be broken apart and you breathing in the air or being around it, and they're not meant to be thrown in the garbage. So that's my heads up on that thing. So I'm going to take this thing apart and see what's in here. I did weigh this thing upstairs. I forgot to bring my scale down here, so I'll have to get that before I start showing you what's in here. But this thing, as it sits, is 21 pounds. So if you were just going to throw this thing in, you know, if you could get away with it with the tube TV here, if you were just going to throw this thing with your tin shred, you're looking at somewhere in today's prices, you know, I'm getting about almost 5 cents a pound now. It went up to like 95 bucks per ton for tin shred. So you'd be looking at somewhere around, you know, 90 cents to $1.20, kind of depending on your prices. So anyway, enough of me talking. Let's get this thing taken apart. I'll start getting some of these covers off there and we'll look together. I'm going to turn this thing off while I take the screws out because you don't want to watch that. Hang on. Okay, so we got the two side plates off. I haven't tested these things, but they feel an awful lot like aluminum. So we'll just let those things sit here. So I did peek into the sides here, but here comes the top. And the top is a really nice piece of extruded aluminum. This stuff feels like aluminum. So I just have to take these black pads off. Oop. And inside, looks pretty gnarly. Looks like we've got some really nice circuit boards in here, full of IC chips. I don't know if they'll be gold fingered or not, but it looks like there's a backplane board down here that's going to have where everything's going to plug into, so they're probably gold fingered. We'll see. There's a big aluminum bracket down in here with some circuit boards underneath here. Looks like there's a big copper coil under this thing, another circuit board here. I don't know what these guys are. Some circuit boards here. Here's the tube TV, and underneath here will be the copper yoke. So we'll see what all that's about here. And it looks to be like there's a really nice brass bar, little chunk of brass right there too. So I'm going to keep working on taking this thing apart because you guys know how to take things apart. So I'm going to keep working on taking this thing apart, and we'll come back when we find some cool stuff and we'll start looking at the value of this stuff. So hang on. Okay, so here's the we got the tube out with this thing, and I've been being quite careful with it. So here's the copper yoke that just sits on top of the tube. So all this glass is part of this glass. So you don't want to break this part out. There's a circuit board that sticks on top of this that usually comes out pretty easily. So when you're handling these things, you want to be, you know, fairly careful not to break them. I don't even recommend messing around with these things, to tell you the truth. I stop doing it unless I take something like this apart. So there's just a clamp that goes around this top part. Sometimes I've had some of the older TVs, they're being brass. So I just get it all the way off. They're usually not this hard to get off, but there we go. That one could be brass. So just this little clamp comes off like that, and then this thing should just slide right out. So then scrap yards will buy them like this by the pound. I think my scrap yard gives me 80 cents a pound for yokes. So you could do it that way. You could bust this thing apart and take out the copper, and you'd get number 2 copper wire for it. It just depends on what you want to do. Personally, I just turn them into the scrapyard like this. I cleaned a bunch of them, and the weight that I get here at 80 cents a pound versus the number 2 copper wire at $1.90 kind of washes out because of the extra weight in this thing. It's really not worth the time and the mess to clean them up. You have these ferrite pieces in here. I didn't know if you see that. These black pieces in here that shatter into a million pieces, and they just make a mess. So I'll just throw it into my bucket, and when I get enough of them, I get 10 pounds or so of these things together, I'll turn it in. So then we'll set this thing aside where it'll be safe and out of the way. And then we are left with this mess. Let's zoom out. There we go. So we're kind of left with this mess, which actually looks fairly interesting, personally. There's some nice brass pieces in here like that. This looks to be brass. That looks to be brass. That looks to be brass. And these boards are just covered in IC chips. So I think this thing looks pretty good. So I'm going to keep working on taking it apart. When I get it busted down a little bit more, we'll kind of come back and look at some of the components of it, okay? Hang on. Okay, so we're kind of getting this thing knocked down a little bit, and I got some of the parts and pieces off. Just a little quick side note. These are like medical shears, like for taking casts and bandages off. If you scrap stuff out, get a pair of these things. I ordered 3 pair online for 10 bucks, something like that. And this kind of ribbon wire, if you're doing this kind of stuff, it just cuts through it like butter. And it's so much easier than sitting there with a pair of wire snips. They're just easy to grab on and on. You can cut, this kind of tubing stuff really, if you come across crap like that. It's just wonderful. It really is. I mean, take a little plug like that and we all run across this kind of wire and it just slices right through it. I mean, they're cheap, easy. You break them, you lose them, you're not out, 30 bucks. $3. So anyway, that's it. So it kind of looks like these things just sort of pop out of there. Alright, well, they're not gold pin cards, or gold finger cards, but there's definitely gold pins in there. And that thing is pretty packed with IC chips. Nice. A couple of these things are easy to remove kind of style ones. I'll have to take a look at them before I take them off, make sure there's no value to them. Just pop this. Looks like to be some sort of, there's little hoses running out of it, so I don't know if it's some kind of little air compressor style thing. Just pop that off. Here's a little copper bearing transformer style gizmo right here. Take these plugs off and stuff, and that should be a high grade board for me. $2.70 a pound on something like that. See what the next one looks like here. So again, take this plug out of there. Another one, gold pins in there, removable IC chips again. That's a good one. That's a gold top, or a gold, I can't remember the name of these things now. A gold cap IC chip. Right there. That's a good one. I'll have to look that up for sure, make sure that's not worth some money. I know it's worth resale money, or recycling money, scrapping it out money, but that might be worth something on its own. But anyway, I'll look into that. And so this board, take this plug off, snip a couple of these off, I'll get high grade for that thing. Easy. And that one is just stacked with chips too. There's another gold pack, a different kind, or gold cap. I keep saying gold pack. There's a nice gold capped IC chip. So I'll have to separate this board off here. There's stacked boards. There's a battery here, so I'll have to take that off. Other than that, another nice board. And last but not least, so far anyway, This one is just stacked with IC chips again. Pop the ones off that are just plug style ones because I get $3 a pound sending those into board sort if I remember right. Yeah. So those are some nice circuit boards. All of them are blank on the back, but all with the gold pins. That should easily be the high grade boards for me. And then it looks like we're going to have a backplane board on here, so I'll just have to take some of this stuff off of here, and then just a bunch of aluminum on there. So that's pretty nice. And here's the other board that came out of there. So take a look at this one real quick. So while I'm doing this, if you do e-waste, you run across this kind of stuff. And I think, all of us do. Maybe not, stuff like this, but, you run across computers, you run across server stuff, you run across switch gear for phones, anything like that. First thing to do, look it up, make sure it doesn't, sell for parts and repair on eBay. That is the first thing to check. Second thing is find out where you can sell circuit boards. If you can't sell circuit boards at your scrapyard, ask them why. Bug them about it. Maybe they'll start looking into it. Although selling them to board sort's great, shipping kills you unless you get a lot of it and you live nearby somewhere. I can get some higher prices selling to board sort, but the ease and the prices that I get from my scrapyard, the only thing that's worth sending to board sort are cell phones and Goldfinger cards and RAM sticks. Otherwise I get better money from my scrapyard anyway. This board's probably not as nice of a grade. There's too much other junk on there and it's not worth cleaning up. So I'll pop off, there's some little IC chips that I can pop off here, so I'll do that. Not quite as nice of a board, but it is what it is. And then that is brass. And I'm getting a little pile of brass going over here. Take my handy hospital shears, and there's some wire. Plugs go in the garbage. Just like that. So I still have another pile to work on, so I'm going to keep going and I'll keep showing you. So, alright, we're starting to make some progress through this thing, starting to get some of the boards picked apart, cleaned up, things like that. So the board like this is the power board for the tube. That's the part that sat on the tube. This black part here is the part that sits in the tube, and so it's looking out this way. So that's sat on top of this. This is just the power board. So something like this, pretty much all I do is clean up the wire the best that I can and take the wire off of it. And it just goes in the low grade boards as it is. There's little coppery things on here. You can pull them off if you want to. There's a little copper coil thing in here that's hardly any copper in it. So we're going to take that and clean the wire off and just set it aside. And then we got a couple other little critters here that we'll look at here in a little bit. So first things first, I'm going to get this board cleared up, start messing with that mess for a minute, and we'll check back in. Hang on. So I started taking this section of this thing apart, and there's an inside of here is an interesting little critter. Look at that hunk of brass on there. That is a big wad of brass. Them long screws holding that thing on. Definitely some kind of air pump. There's the motor for it, but I don't think I can get that thing off of there. Maybe monkey around with it, but it looks on there pretty well. Gets all pressed together, but I'll take a look at it. But that's definitely an electric motor on here. The big hunk of brass on there. I might just go hit it with a hammer and see if this thing snaps apart. We'll have to see. But interesting, for sure. And then this looks just like steel on here, but that's definitely a compressor. There's the gasket for it. So, All right, and then there's this big aluminum chunky thing. I don't know what's in there either. We'll find out in a minute. So that's that. I'm going to keep going. So for the most part, I have the thing taken apart. So if you remember, there's this stuff was surrounding this thing, and I wasn't sure what it was, a transformer or what, or a copper coil. But it is a big copper coil. My scrapyard gives me 15 cents a pound for these things. This is probably 4 pounds maybe, I suppose. 5 maybe. We got the computer fan. I got the IC chips removed out of these boards. The ones I'm going to keep, including the 2 gold cap chips that I've not looked up yet. I'm going to set these over aside here so they stay safe. I have no doubt that this stuff was safe. In here, it was dry and it's sealed shut. And this aluminum case is just all channeled and it's sealed. The outside was wet, but I guarantee none of the stuff got wet on the inside. So I feel safe selling those things if that's what I ended up doing. Anyway, so I've got everything kind of separated out, and I'm going to start weighing things out and getting some values on stuff. Here's my handy scissors again. Just cuts right through these, even these larger wires. It just goes right through them. It's just wonderful. This thing's such a time saver. So I'm going to get this thing settled in, weighed out, separated up, and then we'll come back and take a look and see how much value we got out of this thing. And I guarantee you that it's more than $1.10. Guaranteed. Okay, so it's the next day. I have different colored sleeves on. I had too much stuff to do yesterday, so it takes a while to get all this sorted out and priced out for you guys, all that kind of stuff. So I did get it all worked out, what everything's worth, and let's get into it. So first thing we had was this big copper coil thing here. So I measured weights out in grams, as you can see there, because I can get a little bit more of an accurate weight, as close as I can get it. So at 15 cents a pound, this thing is roughly worth 45 cents as it sits like this. I could do the work, I get the copper out there, but it's just a lot of extra work that I don't have a whole lot of time for, so that'll probably just go just that way. We got the computer fan, just 120 grams for that thing, so just a couple of pennies for that. I just throw them in my bucket and I get enough fans, I bring them in. Just a handful of the computer wire, junky, low grade wire, 130 grams of that thing. It's about 9-10 cents worth. At that rate I get 30 cents a pound for that stuff. So that's that. That's that little motor that was in there. 160 grams of that thing. That's about 4 cents for a motor this size. It's just a little small, really lightweight motor. So that's that thing. What did we have next? This is that copper yoke that came off the tube. At 80 cents a pound, I'll get about 24, 25 cents for this as it sets. These things add up pretty fast. You start chucking them in a bucket as you come across them, they add up pretty quick. So we got the yoke. So the IC chips that I pulled off, they were the socketed IC chips. I didn't unsolder anything like that. So at $3 a pound, that's roughly 86 grams, about 85 cents for those things. They're about $4.50, I believe it's $4.50 a pound right now on board sort. This is one of the items that's worth putting on board sort. They don't package well when the legs are up like this, but the legs are very easy just to bend over, and then they stack. They don't care if they're bent over because they just grind them up for the precious metals. So if you bend the legs down, then they stack up a lot nicer. You can fill a priority mailbox up with 20-25 pounds of these things, and whatever else you have to send them that's high value. So we got those guys, so that's cool. The mid-grade boards are these that still have IC chips and gold bearing material, precious metal bearing material on them, but there's also a lot of extra crap on them. So those things at my scrapyard would sell for about $1.04 for 636 grams. I get about just over $1 for them, something like that. The low grade boards, the ones that are brown boards, junky boards, lots of steel attachments on them, like things like this that don't really have much of anything on them. Things like that. 576 grams, I only get about 26 cents for these things, but throw them in a tub and they add up, and you take them in and get rid of them, right? This back plane board, this is what everything was sitting inside. These things have a little more value than they think, because all these are high value, good gold recovery pins inside of these things. There's usually nothing on the back of back plane boards also. So that guy right there, 180 grams, I'll get about 50 cents for that guy right there. The high grade boards are these guys that have all the IC chips on them. I'll clean up just a little bit of this just to ensure I'll get some of the high grade stuff, or the high grade price for that. But you can see where all these empty slots is where I removed those other IC chips out of there. And so at about $2.70 a pound for those things. Granted, I'll have to take a few things off there. I'll get somewhere right around $2.80 for just these boards alone right here. So that's really nice. Extruded aluminum, I'm going to save you from looking at it just because it doesn't fit on the scale very well and it's going to get really loud. The extruded aluminum is going to be about $2.76. The sheet aluminum is going to be about $1.63. And dirty aluminum, that there was just a little bit here. This is the keypad, and this is some stuff that's won't come out. That's just not worth the effort of getting them out. A couple of strip screws, things like that. It's just not worth sitting there trying to muscle all that out of there. So the dirty, that's 466 grams, so that's going to be about 13 cents for those things. So nothing too great right there. There was quite a bit of brass in there, more than I thought there would be. So there's that stuff, and that right there, 336 grams, so about $1.20, $1.18, $1.20 for that. So that's kind of a nice little surprise right there. And then there's these little electric motory looking things, and then there's these brass chunks on the end, and they're probably not worth the effort. I'm sure that's a rivet in there and it's just not worth monkeying around with. Just 138 grams, so I mean it's 18-20 cents, something like that for just this. If I spent all the time getting this stuff apart, it probably would work out to be about the same, because this would, instead of 55 cents a pound, which I'm getting for these, I would get a dollar, I think it's $1.60 a pound for the brass, and I would get 15 cents a pound for the copper coil part, and then you average it all out, it's about the same money. So it's just kind of not really worth the trouble. So here's the interesting part. These two little gold cap chips here, those are gold tops and gold legs. They're about 10 grams. They were 10, now they're 8. Not probably the most accurate scale. I'm not 100%, there it goes to 10, it's flip-flopping. I'm not 100% sure, I looked on board sort, I'm not 100% sure what I have here, but roughly, I think I'm in the ballpark. They're about $120 a pound for these kind of chips. There's quite a bit of gold in those things. So those two chips alone would be, they're flip-flopping between 8 and 10 grams here, so probably $2.50 to $2.65 just for these two out of all that stuff. So I'm going to add all this up. I'll come back and we'll look at totals here in a second. Okay, so I had my pen and the paper and the calculator and the scale and everything, and got everything figured out. So what did we say this thing, if you just threw it in with your e-waste or your scrap steel, you know, your shred steel, would be, you know, 90 cents to $1.10, something like that, I think. Well, after pricing all this out, doing the work, everything else, the one thing I did forget, that's all the tin shred steel kind of stuff, so that's another 9 or 10 cents. So you do the work on this stuff and you get this, you know, you get it all taken apart, and you're going to end up with roughly $14.92 worth of scrap, you know, give or take a little bit. Those are my prices. You know, yours could be higher than mine in areas, or lower in areas. The fact of the matter is if I wasn't doing this to do a video, this would have taken me maybe 15 minutes to take apart. It was fun to take apart. It was certainly interesting. I've never run into one of those, so if you ever run into these things, now you kind of have an idea what to expect, and that it's definitely worth taking apart. Thanks for watching my videos, and we'll see you guys again soon.